In the last episode, war between the Takeda and Uesugi began over the Kawanakajima plain, as Shingen's march north was continually halted by the firm defense laid out by Kenshin. Yet as the years dragged on, both forces had yet to fully engage their armies, resulting in the first 3 encounters not erupting into any major battles. However, as a temporary calm settles over the Kawanakajima plain, there are stirrings to the west, as Imagawa Yoshimoto plans to march on the capital. By 1554, it has been 87 years since the official end of the Onin War in 1467. Essentially, 87 years since the Sengoku Jidai began, plunging Japan into endless war between the many clans who rule the land. As we've already seen, the Ashikaga shogunate, masters of the samurai class, were weak and powerless to stop the fighting, and instead, over the years, the shoguns diverted their attention inward to the arts and culture which were rich in the capital. Had the Ashikaga shogunate been strong, their might would equal authority, and with that authority, they could have potentially brought an end to the wars which plagued the country. Although the current shogun, Ashikaga Yoshiteru, had no reason to feel weak, as he was supported by powerful allies, namely the Miyoshi clan, who, if you remember in years past, broke away from their Hosokawa overlords and had since then seeped their influence deep into shogunal politics, just as their predecessors had done. Of course, the Miyoshi had used their control to maintain their position of superiority over Kyoto and central Honshu. In fact, the Miyoshi are a prime example of the problems facing Japan by the mid-1500s, as each clan was essentially out solely for their own gain. What I mean by this is the main driving force behind the majority of each clan's territorial expansion was regional dominance, which is one of the things I really hope you take away from these videos, because there is a very popular myth that you see quite a lot, that each daimyo was out to become the next shogun, which is completely false. In fact, to even be qualified to become shogun, a daimyo must be able to trace his lineage back to the Minamoto clan, the rulers of the first shogunate. Thus, each daimyo, for the most part, was only out to increase their power and sphere of influence. So the wars continued, creating high amounts of lawlessness and an endless quantity of hardships for the lower classes of society. Fortunately, provinces under the rule of stronger daimyo were less prone to the suffering that was felt within war-torn regions. And by 1554, one of the mightiest and most stable clans in the entire country were the Imagawa, led by Imagawa Yoshimoto, who ruled over Suruga, Toyotomi, and asserted strong influence and control over the Matsudaira clan of Mikawa. Though in previous years, the Imagawa had clashed with many of their neighbors, most notably the Hojo and Oda, Yoshimoto's poor capabilities as a military leader saw to the failure of each of his campaigns. Thus, in time, he would instead entrust leadership of his armies to his uncle, the militant monk Taigen Sessai. Yoshimoto's true strength actually laid in the realm of politics and diplomacy. In fact, one can see Yoshimoto had an infatuation with court politics, as he even modeled his capital of Sanpu to look and function like the imperial court in Kyoto. And with this love of politics, an idea popped into his head. The Imagawa were strong, and their position was an ideal one, with their provinces sitting upon the Tokaido Road. This caused Yoshimoto to begin speculating. What if I was to march on the capital? What if the Imagawa were to seize Kyoto? Now, I have read different sources that say different things. Some say Yoshimoto wished to become shogun himself, deposing the Ashikaga, while other sources I've read merely claim he wished to bend the Ashikaga to his will, as other clans had previously accomplished. If he truly desired to become the next shogun, it was wholly in his power, as the Imagawa could in fact trace their family back to the Minamoto clan. Yet, I do not believe Yoshimoto wished to become the new shogun, and this is for two reasons. The first being that to oppose the Ashikaga shogunate would create a larger struggle than ever desired, as many clans would no doubt rise up to support the Ashikaga and the status quo. The second reason was that being shogun was to be military leader of all Japan, and as I've already mentioned, by now Yoshimoto completely understood that he was not a strong military commander. Thus, he most likely sought to control the Ashikaga, dominating them for his own aims. However, it is not known whether he wished to do this out of a lust to strengthen his own position, or rather if he actually felt a benevolent desire to bring an end to the chaotic age of warring states. With his heart now set on claiming the capital, he began laying down the foundations for his great march. As I mentioned in the previous episode, beginning in 1554, Yoshimoto used his political savvy to form a grand alliance. He called together the leaders of the Takeda and Hojo. Although Yoshimoto and Shingen were already strong allies, as Yoshimoto was married to Shingen's sister, the plan was for even more marriages to occur, binding the three clans together with family ties. With a secure alliance, they could each put full focus and effort behind accomplishing their own goals. Hojo Ieyasu could continue swallowing the Kanto region. Takeda Shingen could place total attention on his war against Uesugi Kenshin, and Imagawa Yoshimoto could embark on his campaign to claim Kyoto. Unfortunately, before he could even begin his march, his great strategist Taigen Sessai died in 1557. Although all hope was not lost, as a new rising star could be seen, Matsudaira Motoyasu, the man who would in time become one of Japan's greatest leaders and the third of the country's great unifiers, Tokugawa Ieyasu. Motoyasu's childhood had been a chaotic one, and is suited for its own video in time. However, what is important to know now was that he was raised as a hostage of the Imagawa clan. Yet now that he had come of age and had taken leadership of the Matsudaira clan of Mikawa under the vassalage of the Imagawa, he was quick to prove himself as a competent military leader, scoring decisive victories against the Oda of Owari province, now ruled by Oda Nobunaga, a man considered by most to be a fool. With strong figures like Motoyasu leading the Imagawa march on the capital, Yoshimoto felt confident his plan could work. In fact, it was a completely feasible and level-headed plan at that, as the clans that stood between Yoshimoto and Kyoto were seen as nowhere near as strong as the Imagawa. All he needed to do was push aside any opposition along the way, and his victory could be achieved. Thus finally, in June of 1560, his march began, with the first leg of his journey to be crushing the Oda clan of Owari. With his rear secure, he brought with him a massive combined Imagawa Matsudaira army, numbering around 25,000 strong. The initial stages of the invasion of Owari went as best as could be desired for Yoshimoto, easily seizing and burning the castles along the Oda frontier, with Motoyasu personally capturing Marune Castle before being ordered to move up and take position at Odaka. With the Oda on the verge of collapse and victory in his sight, Yoshimoto brought his main body up to a forested location known as Okehazama, where he wished to briefly pause for a head viewing ceremony before moving on to take the Oda power base of Kyosu. Meanwhile, chaos was ensuing for the Oda, being completely unable to halt the Imagawa advance, and near capitulation, many Oda retainers proposed plans to hold up in the castle for a last-ditch defense, while others pleaded with Nobunaga to flee and allow Owari to fall. Nobunaga would have none of it. Acting as the wild card he always was, he opted for a different plan. Wishing to meet his enemy in the field, Nobunaga quickly mustered what men he could, forming an army around 2,000, and sallied forth towards the war front. arriving at the Imagawa-controlled Narumi Castle, local scouts informed Nobunaga of Yoshimoto's location at Okehazama. Thus, he quickly devised a plan of attack. He ordered his soldiers to erect hundreds of banners opposite of Narumi. It aims to trick the Imagawa into thinking that was where the Oda main body lie. With the Imagawa garrison at Narumi falling for the ruse, Nobunaga led his forces towards Okehazama under the cover of night. It was then that Nobunaga was blessed with the best of all possible luck. A tremendous thunderstorm erupted overhead. With the ensuing downpour and the black of night covering their advance, the Imagawa scouts never had a chance to spot the Oda army coming, as Nobunaga led his army around to the north. Early, near the dawn, as the rain began to cease, Nobunaga led his small force on a valiant charge against the Imagawa encampment at Okehazama. The Oda were outnumbered 12-1, yet with their attack being completely unsuspected, and many of the Imagawa troops being unarmed, asleep, or still drunk after a long night of celebrating their victories, the Oda swept through Okehazama, butchering the Imagawa army. Some Imagawa samurai did manage to form up in aims to fend off the Oda attackers, yet they were too late to form any real defense. Yoshimoto, upon hearing the commotion, charged out of his tent to see what was going on. However, before he could even take it all in, he was cut down and decapitated. The Oda had won the brief yet legendary battle at Okehazama, though I have a hard time calling it a battle, even if it technically was one. Rather, I prefer to refer to it as a massacre, as so many of the Imagawa soldiers were slaughtered before they could even put up any resistance. What was left of the once grand army of the Imagawa fled home, including Motoyasu, who returned to Mikawa in aims to finally break free from the grips of his now weakened overlords. Nobunaga was now viewed as a first-rate daimyo, and a fool no more, for crushing a clan as mighty as the Imagawa. However, Yoshimoto's planned march on the capital would have a profound effect on Nobunaga, as in time, he would take the idea for himself. One final interesting piece of information is the presence of a figure known as Tokichiro at Okehazama. Tokichiro was an Ashigaru foot soldier who was made Oda Nobunaga's sandal bearer. In time, Nobunaga would realize that Tokichiro was smart and cunning, and eventually he would be given leadership positions, soon enough becoming the famous Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the second of Japan's three great unifiers. Thus, oddly enough, all three of Japan's would-be unifiers were all present in Owari province during Yoshimoto's march towards the capital, which is extremely fascinating in retrospect. So, what can we learn? The strong position of the Imagawa led to Yoshimoto planning a march on Kyoto in aims to dominate the shogunate and perhaps bring an end to the Sengoku Jidai. He began by forming an alliance between his clan, the Takeda, and the Hojo in aims to create a sense of security for his advance west. However, the first step on his march to the capital would be crushing the Oda who stood in his way. Relying on skilled commanders such as Matsudaira Motoyasu, Yoshimoto began his invasion in 1560, scoring easy victories against the Oda in the initial portion of their attack. Yet, he grew arrogant and decided to briefly bring his army to a halt for a head-viewing ceremony, allowing the spontaneous Oda Nobunaga to charge in under the cover of a thunderstorm, completely shattering the Imagawa army and slaying Yoshimoto, an act which catapulted Nobunaga to become one of Japan's most prominent warlords overnight. In the next episode, we return to the Kawanakajima Plain as Kenshin and Shingen begin the largest and most legendary of their battles. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell if you enjoyed this video and found it to be most informative.